Now get ready. Here we go.
What is going on, everybody? It is Arkham, and today we are reviewing the season of 2024 at Six Flags Great Adventure, which has been argued to be one of, if not the worst seasons ever operated, not only for the park's 50 years, but also the worst operated season, period. And a lot of it could have just been poor management stuff. A lot of it could have been corporate decisions. A lot of it involved a sort of event that happened at the beginning of July. A lot of it also involved a lot of different things that we'll discuss in this video, because a lot of it wasn't exactly the park's fault, and we'll get into that in a minute. But this was clearly something that could have been luck. It could have been just unforeseen circumstances. There's a lot of different things that could have played into why Great Adventure had a very rough 2024 season. We're going to break it down month by month. We're going to go through all the months when the park opened, from opening weekend all the way to its very last day and very last time in a month. And we're going to dive into all of that very, very shortly. So if you like this sort of review of the seasons of Great Adventure and you want me to continue this going into other years, don't forget, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Always. Thank your Right Up Raiders. Let's get into the 2024 Great Adventure review. A few things worth mentioning before we enter the first month, and that is that, just so that we are clear, this is my home park. I visit this park basically anytime I get the opportunity to. I show up every day if I so wanted to. I love Great Adventure, and really a lot of what I'm going to say is not to bash them. It's not meant to absolutely dig them into the ground. It's just because I'm such a passionate and loyal customer and consumer to them that I want this park to improve. And I think a lot of you watching this would also feel the same way and think that these videos that you see, whether it's mine or somebody else's that were to review everything that occurred in the Great Adventure season, can agree that all we want is for this park to be the best it possibly can be. And that's just to emphasize that right now. Again, I love this park. I will always go to this park anytime I get the opportunity to. Nothing is meant to directly put the blame on people, but at the end of the day, people always end up pointing the blame to someone. So this whole video is really just meant to highlight specific points, specific incidents that ended up occurring that ended up making this season arguably the worst ever operated season of a theme park, arguably ever. So let's get into the month of March. Let's begin with the month of March. And March, the park opened up on March 16th of 2024. Originally, the park usually opens around the time that most schools end up having spring break. Most schools did not have spring break until about 2 or 3 weeks after that day, which in itself usually messes up a lot of scheduling, especially for maintenance crew. And usually when it comes down to maintenance for roller coasters, especially for Great Adventure, 9 times out of 10 when it comes to roller coasters, they often take apart their entire trains, rebuild it from the ground up, and there you go. That's kind of their sort of way of doing things track wise. They go through the whole track, they kind of just disassemble rides and reassemble it again. Like, they take good full care of these rides, and it's crucial for them to do that as well. Obviously, this messes up a lot of the order because 9 times out of 10 they have to either rush certain things or they have to pull back on certain projects. Now, obviously, the 2024 season for them is a massive time. It's the 50th anniversary. They have announced this coaster that was sort of last minute, not going to lie. They announced that Flash Vertical Velocity back in August of 2023. So that's kind of a stretch in itself. Not only that, but there is no full rendering of Flash until opening day, roughly, which already is not a great sign from a standpoint of when all the stuff is. And in March, there was only footers in the ground for Flash Vertical Velocity, already just not good Just not good signs at all coming out of Flash and seeing that progress right then and there. Also in March was really just more shipments of Flash just making its way underneath Nitro, which is where it basically stayed. Kingda Ka also was not open until about a week after or so. We don't exactly know what the instance for this was, but we do know that that definitely was something that happened as well. El Toro was supposedly retracked in the offseason, as which adds a little bit more to the projects that they had, which we'll kind of talk about the de-evolution of El Toro in a second, because that ride kind of had its ups and downs this season. Log Flume wasn't open. Runaway Mine Train, Skull Mountain, a plethora of other rides as well weren't open. I'm kind of just looking through a bunch of my notes here, and Superman was closed. Skyway, Log Flume, Big Wheel were going through renovations as mentioned. Cyborg was closed for Flash. It would not open for the entire season. Skull Mountain was closed because they were doing the small renovation, adding in the lights and so on and so forth. Also in March, for about the first or so week, they had these Ride Again wristbands. These were like the worst things on the face of the planet. I don't know why these things honestly existed. And it didn't help that the entire time for most of the rides, everything was on one train. And that includes Jersey Devil. That includes Nitro to an yeah, every roller coaster had one train ups. So that doesn't help anything at all. It made lines basically abysmal, and it just was not fun. Um, Again, we'll get when we talk about Medusa later on in the video. There was a whole stretch of time where Medusa, basically up until Fright Fest, was on one train. That was rough, and these riding and wristbands, unfortunately, didn't really help at all. I felt like it just was more of a hindrance than anything else. Luckily, we would see Ka, Lantern, and Superman open up before Memorial Day weekend. Um, and the riding and wristbands were kind of like just a panic button, essentially. But a lot of things in March did happen. We did get the introduction to the bricks on Dream Street through this, which was slowly being progressed throughout the season. It would grow much, much larger. They would change up the pattern a little bit like towards the holiday and the park time. But a lot of the issues with the bricks is how expensive they were. They were over $100. You get your own tiny one on top of it still taking a while. And after a while, these bricks just slowly were running out of its like steam. Like not a lot of people were buying it, but also they were starting to fade out very, very quickly. So hopefully, like in the future, they look towards finding some kind of brick locator where you could locate where your brick is easily instead of having to search down, like basically hurting my neck. And that's not me complaining about my neck. That's just basically me looking out for everybody else, trying to find a brick that's not there, that's not yours. So otherwise, that's sort of what we're looking at here for March at the moment. But everything's sort of like slowly building towards what eventually happens here with the for March. Now let's move on to April. Let's begin the discussion of the month of April. And this is where we saw a lot of interesting events begin to occur. Primarily, the start of vertical construction on Flash. Yes, track and supports were finally getting put into place for Flash. It took long enough finally for that to show up. Good golly. And yeah, we already know where that would lead to eventually, but at least we finally got to see track get put into place. It was much later into April when that happened, but good grief that we got that as well. Also, the Barnstormer. Yeah, that ride, that Katie ride that was from Looney Tunes Seaport that got moved over to where the old outdoor arena thing was in Junior Thrill Seekers. Yeah, that opened up supposedly. I kind of forgot that ride existed, but it did open up on I believe April, like early April, like that first week of April. Speaking of the first week in April, there was an earthquake. Yeah, there was an earthquake at Great Adventure that hit, I believe, on April 5th. And my gosh, I was actually sitting at my desk when that happened. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what that was. And then I'm getting text from family members being like, oh, there was like a 3 point something earthquake. I'm like, what? So that was kind of crazy to feel. I was not in the park when that happened, but that was certainly a very odd time to say the least. So that happened. Luckily, everything seemed to be okay. They basically had just had to pull like a whole emergency slash close everything sort of deal, and then yada yada yada. We also from April they also started to kind of do this thing with like Mr. Six, where they basically said that we're doing this new thing called Missy Six, which I guess kind of turned into like more of like a AI, hey, I can answer all your frequently asked questions kind of thing. I don't think anybody used it, I'll be honest with you. But I mean, that's kind of cool that they did this. They also teased this thing that was kind of like this word jumble thing that not a single person cared about, nor did the park even do anything about. I don't know what the deal with it was, but it was some weird word teaser. I don't even know if anybody remembers anything of the sort. Let me know, but I don't remember jack about it, and it didn't really feel that important because, well, it wasn't. It's really the honest reality of it. So, luckily, outside of that, there's been a couple of other reopenings that ended up occurring for the throughout April, but otherwise, again, there really hasn't been anything new, unfortunately, in April outside of finally getting vertical construction on Flash. All right, let's begin discussing May. This is really the month of Flash. Flash goes fully vertical. Not only that, but it tops off right at Memorial Day weekend, which is really cool. That's a great accomplishment for Flash. Basically, the entire track gets entirely done. They get the tower up, they get those final things topped off with it. It's pretty much done, which is great. They haven't gotten like the light at the top on yet, but all in all, they get Flash topped off. Vertical construction took not about a month and a half, which is pretty good for a ride of that size. Yeah, we could have gone a little bit faster, but so on and so forth. They also promote a pre-sale during this month as well, which I think is very interesting. I don't know who exactly took advantage of the pre-sale. I didn't, but they did. They kind of had this massive pass sale, and really with that sort of, I guess their drive was to try to promote up the Decade Day to get people to go to that, which we'll get to that when we get to July because oh boy, guys, July will be a stretch. But in May, we get that. We also start hearing even more rumblings about a potential merger with Cedar Fair. Yeah. So that kind of starts to really pipe up a lot more in this month as well, which is so interesting. And on top of this, we also get a lot of live entertainment coming back to the park in the form of the Tone Travelers. We get the Flashbang Brass Band out of this. They also have we start seeing more of those the group that's in Frontier Adventures. Like they don't really start coming out until around this time, which is really cool to now start seeing that come out. The interactive map debuts finally on the app. So not I don't know a lot of people that actually used it, but they had that open up as you start to be accessible to use as well. Superman also opens up in May as well, towards the end of May. So we get another roller coaster on top of that, as well as Skull Mountain, which has been going through an extensive repaint up until now. So Skull Mountain and Superman both open up for the start of the season, to which Skull Mountain kind of becomes disco. It's very, very interesting. So it's a whole lot of interesting occurrences with the month of May, but definitely the biggest accomplishment that you need to get out of May is the fact that we finally get Flash finished off. Superman opens up, as well as Skull Mountain. So now we fast track to June. In the month of June, we get a couple of different decorations as well as another reopening as well. First off, let's spit the obvious. The Venga bus is back. Oh my gosh, this was so cool to see. I mean, seeing this bus show up right in front of Joker is everything that anybody would have ever wanted. I hope that bus stays there forever and ever and ever. I don't think it will, but man, how cool was that to just see that thing just plopped right in the middle of that spot, because it fills the gap really well. It's a great photo op. A lot of people have been taking full advantage of that bus being there too. So I really hope that bus stays around. On top of this, El Toro closes for a little bit. I don't exactly know the full details as to why it was closed, but it did close for a little bit. We also, speaking of El Toro, double-sided lockers. We finally get double-sided lockers for El Toro, which sort of starts to become the new norm, I guess. Like, we actually could bring in loose articles to El Toro to then put into a double-sided locker and then retrieve it later. It becomes like the greatest quality of life thing that we could have gotten this season. And it made a lot of people very much anticipate, when would Kingda Ka get it? When would Jersey Devil get this? Is Flash gonna have it? Which it is. Um, and all these other rides. Joker, like, when are these rides that we can't bring any loose articles on with? When are they going to start getting double-sided lockers? Double-sided lockers are fantastic, and these ones are still pretty good too. Yeah, they're on the thinner side, don't get me wrong, but they are able to fit your smaller belongings in. If you have a backpack, you'd have to get a bigger locker, which they still have at that location or the other locations around the park. So once again, these lockers are fantastic. One of the best things we got out of the 2024 season at Great Adventure for sure. Um, on top of this as well, this was when Zumanjaro reopened. And literally, it reopened for, like, I swear to you, like, maybe a week. Like, it opened for a week and then it closed again. And then from there, it didn't return. Don't really know the whole deal. And then on top of this, we had rumors get thrown around that Mr. Six was going to come back for Fright Fest for about a week. And then it was confirmed in a Fright Fest trailer, which confirmed Stranger Things, Saw, Conjuring, basically all of these IPs that they have reserved for a bunch of the parks to use for their Fright Fest mazes. And man, this got so many people hyped up, especially Stranger Things and how massive that IP is. Got so many people hyped up. I mean, this was really just a time where a lot of exciting things started to come around and just get added on to just a massive list of things that Great Adventure can offer for that. And also, Medusa's on ride video finally surfaces as well. Even though it's still on one train, we get something else. We get Medusa's on ride video as well. It's a smaller thing, but not many people would pay attention to that, but you can now see that as well. So that's basically what we get out of June. Let's move on as well. And one more thing as well before we go on to July, but we get confirmation that the merger between Six Flags and Cedar Fair will happen and would happen on July 1st, which so happens to be Decade Day. All right, July hits. Yeah, let's talk about Decade Day, which was probably the biggest disappointment of the entire season. It was promised, and I think for a lot of people they would understand the anger, but it was promised that we would have log flume, giant wheel with the lights, flash vertical velocity, all of these things ready to go by the time that Decade Day were to happen, which unfortunately none of that happened. I think we all had the idea that Flash was not going to be ready by then, but we were anticipating maybe that there would be Giant Wheel. And Giant Wheel would actually open up 2 weeks after the event. It would actually open up on the 6th, roughly the 15th and the 16th is when we would get the Giant Wheel back up. Other things that we would have gotten during Decade Day, but we didn't get, the Retro Bar. We got the Retro Bar about 2 weeks after the fact, and they even started doing Fright Fest preparations during this as well. Unfortunately, all this stuff just wasn't really just meant to be. And I've kind of discussed it before in my Flash delayed video. And really the reality is that, like, they put way too much strain on themselves. I feel like they had so much to do where they had to cut back because of it, and ultimately that ended up biting them in the rear. Flash being a last minute decision was not beneficial to them one bit, versus a whole other side of the coin being, well, they have all these projects, they should have had more maintenance to be with them, and yeah, those are all very viable reasons and things that they should have had, but they just never had. Um, they had the like, but otherwise, outside of those things that were meant to happen but didn't, they had like a parade that happened. It was cute. I mean, they had all the characters in like golf carts, and they had like entertainers with flags, and they had the flashbang brass band and all like the musicians kind of walking the path as well. It was cute. They didn't do that for the whole season. They kind of did it only for like about a month or so throughout the whole month of July. They kind of just went from a whole decade day to kind of like a decade month, so to speak. Um, so that's what they pretty much did. One of the biggest highlights from July, though, I have to say, is the 4th of July event. I think they did really good with this event. The fireworks were fantastic. If you haven't seen the whole fireworks stuff from 4th of July Fest, it's actually really good. So definitely go and check around with that. We get information about pricing for Fright Fest, which opens up a whole nother can of worms, which many people were not super pleased with. Because originally for the pricing is that you would pay separate from Fright Fest versus your actual day in the park. They later got rid of that, but that was originally their plan to kind of just take more money out of people, which did not go very well for them. They actually, as I said earlier, they eventually took that out. And then the last big thing that we got is that they finally put up the Flash emblems at the top of Flash Vertical Velocity, essentially topping it off, which is sort of this big thing that we got out of it. Also, Wonder Woman reopens, because Wonder Woman was down for like a whole like month because it had a hydraulic leak from the top of it. Like you literally saw all the hydraulics leak from the top of the thing, and it looked absolutely disgusting. It's like a squid inked on it or something. And that got all cleared away. So Wonder Woman was able to reopen at the end of the month, which is great to see because Wonder Woman has been going very strong for the entire rest of the season there on out. And hopefully that's a ride we don't lose, because now we've essentially lost 3 of our 4 flat rides, and Wonder Woman is the last one left now. Um, but now we get into other things such as ideas of combining possible passport stuff, and the passport system, the all park passport that would start in 2025 in line with the merger. A lot of people would end up doing this, including myself. I ended up getting the all park passport that would go into effect next season. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that works for next season. Obviously, I can't comment on the all park passport because I haven't really tried it yet. So that will be something that I will definitely come back and revisit when we get around to that. But that's enough speaking about July, because July had a lot of things going on. How about we talk about August? In the month of August, we get the couple of different breaking news stuff coming out. First things first is that we find out that legacy memberships for now are staying. We don't know how long this will be for, but I think they're going to be looking towards getting rid of this probably for the next season, if not the season after that, mainly because they just don't get enough revenue from this. But this is something to look out for in the future. But in the middle of August, we get the breaking news out of Great Adventure that they will be delaying Flash Vertical Velocity. And this triggered the holy guacamole out of people. And I have a whole separate video talking about why I personally think that it was a good thing that it happened. And yeah, not many people were very much for that opinion, but that is what it is. So definitely go in and check out that video if you have yet to do so, because I think it talks about a lot of different things that end up happening about this as well. So that's definitely something that happens during the whole entire thing. We also get a lot of different announcements from all the other parks. So we find out that New England's getting a coaster and Quantum Accelerator and Intamin Straddle. We find out that Six Flags Great America is getting Wrath of Rakshasha, B&M Dive Coaster that's going to open up in 2025 in Illinois. And whole bunch of plethora stuff as well. They start building up the Flash path that's underneath Flash as well. That starts to come along very, very nicely. And outside of that, we finally start to see testing on the log flume. I know I haven't mentioned the log flume a heck of a lot, but finally, log flume starts testing and it reopens in August as well, right before Fright Fest, which it would stay open for a large majority of Fright Fest as well. On top of this, we get a whole massive amount of preparation for Fright Fest on top of this as well. Like we start getting the pieces together, figuring out where all these sections are and what they're going to do, which is really, really cool to see as well. And just getting all this stuff as well. And as they're building up the Flash path, we also find out it fully opens up, which is sick. I love seeing all that stuff with Flash. We get a whole lot more details. The station starts to get built up. Many different things start to happen around Flash, Fright Fest, you name it. Because, man, this summer, in terms of building up Flash, yeah, it took a while. Yeah, they were delayed it to 2025, but they still continued to build it up. But as mentioned in the video that talks about Flash's delay, it actually gives them a massive opportunity to have Flash ready to go at the very start of the season in 2025. So stay tuned for that. And hopefully, with the direction of that happening, that most definitely will happen. So let's get into September now. In the month of September, the season for Great Adventure not only gets spooky in a good way, but also a very bad way. So let's start with the main thing is that is the beginning of Fright Fest, which technically didn't really start on time. They only had 2 mazes ready to go for the first 2 weeks. So they had 2 weeks of previews. Then they had another week of previews where they debuted a few more mazes, and then they didn't fully begin the experience for Fright Fest until we get into October, which is wild to me. I mean, this was just a bunch of just unfortunate circumstances. I don't know who the heck people could point the blame to for this one. They've had many different buildings erect around Kingda Ka, as well as one right next to Dark Knight for indoor buildings for fright mazes, and none of them were ready to go. I mean, it's pretty unfortunate to see all that come down because it sucks. But it took a while for all of it to come back together. But eventually, we got the full Fright Fest experience, which, I mean, you can watch any of the vlogs that involve Fright Fest to it, and I talk all about that. I have a whole ranking video of all the 9 mazes. There is one clear standout maze, which was the Asylum, and man, I really hope that they just replicate the Asylum. I would personally say that they should do a much lesser amount of mazes, but increase the quality by a substantial amount. Again, the quality of Asylum, but only do like maybe 6 or 7 mazes. Like you don't have to do 9 mazes. 9 mazes was a lot of mazes for Fright Fest. I'm not gonna lie. But we had all that happen. On top of that, as well, we got to finally see the Flash Vertical Velocity trains show up on site, which was really awesome to see. That had me super, super excited to finally get to see the Flash Vertical Velocity trains. They were covered up, but it's such a massive change because now they can begin testing, which when we get into October, we'll talk about the testing parts in a minute. The spookiest part of the entire month is that the rumors started to come out about Kingda Ka and Zumanjaro, that they were both on the chopping block potentially and could be closing in November. We don't really get too much information. It's super vague, and the word to spread it out to others becomes increasingly difficult because it's met with so much backlash against other people that are trying to put the word out there about this ride that are saying you need to get out here and just ride it as much as you can. The word kind of starts around now, it starts to spread out a little bit more, but not until we get to like October, November is when people are like, oh gosh, this is actually potentially going to happen. So it's around this time where we start to sort of hear the flickering of these words a little bit, but I mean, it's really where like you'll start to see like more people start to kind of pick up the pace a little bit when it comes to Ka's potential removal. And when we get to October, it becomes even more noticeable. So let's get into that conversation a bit. Now, in the month of October, Superman ends up reopening after some issues with like electrical stuff, which kind of has been swerved onto saying, oh, there's a haunt maze here, which was the Conjuring, that's kind of being helped for that. And then it got thrown into a virtual queue, which, I mean, that was kind of a mixed bag in itself. But the biggest thing that we get out of the whole entire thing is one, Flash begins testing during the day, during the night. It begins to test, and it's really cool to see this ride finally functioning and moving properly the way that it's intended to. And it's a lot of fun to see all of it start to those pieces for Flash start to come together, even though it was pushed back. I really think that Flash was just, it's like seeing that test just made me a little bit more happier, especially since one of the larger things that we're getting out of this is that we finally end up seeing markers around the site of King Ka and a little bit of Green Lantern. This really gets a lot more difficult. And oddly enough, we found some of these markers on Halloween, which makes it so much worse. But we start to finally get those rumblings that this is probably going to happen. And it sucks. It really sucks that this ended up happening. So seeing all that come down and like people now realizing like, oh gosh, Ka's probably going down, and even potentially Green Lantern. So now you have two coasters that are potentially on the chopping block, which makes it all the more crazier of things to discuss as well. And that all leads into what ends up happening in November. In the month of November, not only do we see even more markers show up, but this is also the final day of operation for Green Lantern, King Ka, and the Twister. So, and all those rides would be set for demolition. The parachute tower would come down. The Twister would get torn out. Green Lantern would get demolished, becoming the second or third B&M roller coaster to be fully demolished. And then now we're getting confirmation Zumanjaro and King Ka will be imploded in February. This is rough. And for a lot of people, this is super hard. I'm not going to stay on this topic too long because I know I could talk about it for like too long. But hearing that happen is very, very hard for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And in that sort of overarching thing that ends up happening, we get even more things, not for 2025, but for 2026, where they announce new coasters as well as new attractions across the entirety of the Six Flags Entertainment Corporation chain for 2026, including that Great Adventure would get, and I quote, a multi-record breaking launch coaster for 2026. That can mean a ton of different things. There's a whole speculation video on my channel to check out. I will try to leave a card for you when I'm editing this video, but be sure to check out that video for my 5 possible options for what that coaster could be, because there's a whole lot of things happening with that. So all that happens, Lantern starts to get demolished, and all that from there then gets into Holiday in the Park. Yes, Holiday in the Park started just a couple weeks ago, at least from when I was creating this video, on the opening weekend, which is the weekend of the 23rd, 24th of November. So that started up. We also finally get to see Giant Wheel with the lights. Yeah, and my gosh, these lights are so bright. I cannot believe how much light is used. And like none of the trees around the giant wheel have any lights on it. That's how bright the giant wheel is. It's mental how crazy bright that wheel is. And as mentioned before, like so much lantern deconstruction ends up happening. Like already a ton of the ride is just totally ripped apart to shreds. So there's a whole lot to unpack when all that is said and done here. And now we get into the month of December. And guys, I think this month had a lot more things going on than you might think. So, obviously, the continuation of Holiday in the Park happened and a bunch of other stuff. Lantern continues to get demolished, and just even more pieces and pieces get absolutely just ripped to shreds. Like it just becomes flat. Um, right off the bat, they debut a brand new brick design with Kingda Ka's logo on it, which looks super cool. I got one for me. I'm excited to see how that looks. But on top of this, we end up having incidents to two roller coasters over the span of about a week. So I believe like the second or so week into December, the cars on Joker collide on the lift hill. How that even happens, I have no idea. And then directly after that, we ended up having Harley Quinn have a derailment for some crazy thing. Nobody was hurt, thankfully. And for Joker, nobody was on that. Nobody was on the Joker. They were actually testing something, and then it just suddenly happened. So there really wasn't any issues with Joker. Joker's now running on two trains. It's back open. Harley, I don't think is going to open for the rest of the season, but I don't really know. It probably didn't. If anything, I'll update the video if it did reopen. But Harley is, yeah, that two instances that easily could have been avoided. But it really just shows it feels like, especially for the maintenance, they went from having a lot of strain on them to now like suddenly just everything just kind of blows up in their face. And they're just, it feels like there wasn't a lot of accountability. It's like there's no clear connection from the operator to them. I don't know if it's just because it feels like that the maintenance team was being lazy, or that like the operator just needs to be trusted more. Like the cohesion between both departments clearly are not aligned, and that in itself is a massive issue, because at the end of the day, the operator should know more about the ride because they're the ones that run it every day. Whereas a maintenance worker would be there to fix said ride and should know what the issue is when the operator tells them to, and not just say, "Oh, you're fine." But at the end of the day, like that's clearly two issues that could have very much been remedied. And at least from how I've heard of it and how I've interpreted how I feel it went, we'll say. And from what I've heard, that's kind of how I'm hearing it to be. And again, they could have very much been avoided. Um, After all that said and done, on the 19th of December is when the parachutes got taken down, went timber, and fell over via a controlled explosion. Um, you could find the video yourself. I am not going to put that in. And then a couple days after that, we finally get the confirmed permits filed for the controlled implosion of Kingda Ka and Zumajaro, which will happen sometime in mid-February, as mentioned earlier on. And then we also find out that Lantern, the only thing left standing right now, vertical loop, and then the chain with first drop. My guess is that they wouldn't be touching that until after the season ends, when they have the whole parking lot to themselves to do just that. Um, Outside that, Twister got removed on the 26th during the past couple days when the park was closed due to weather. But all in all, I mean, there's been so much happening inside the park itself. We finally got the Flash Q building getting built up at the moment, and that's what we got to work with here right now. I mean, there isn't that much else to do um, in terms of news from the park and things that I've seen, things that other stuff like that. Where there's also updated rumors. Potentially, Cyborg is on the chopping block as well now. We don't know anything. There's no full confirmation with that, but this is stuff I've heard possibly happening, and I've even seen things myself that kind of lean towards the idea that Cyborg Cyberspin is possibly also getting removed. Um, so I have a vlog out from the 26th that kind of shows what I see on why I think Cyborg could potentially be taken out as well. Um, but right now, that's December at the current moment and the state of where everything's at. So let's kind of give a little bit of a wrap up to what I have noticed thus far from the season. Okay, so to wrap everything up, I think the season for 2024 for Great Adventure was, I would definitely say, a dud. There was a lot of issues with it. The park just didn't look up to par from previous times. And then just all the closures on top of that, the rough start in the beginning, Decade Day not living up to the hype. And then on top of that, closing Ka, closing Zoo, closing Twister, closing Lantern, knocking down parachutes, just continue to knock just more and more over. What this kind of reminds me of is the season that King's Dominion had the year they announced that Volcano would be demolished. It's kind of reminding me of that a little bit. And this is kind of like the downward trend I kind of see this park having very soon. And King's Dominion sort of had that downward trend, but it just took them 7 years to kind of recuperate that. As now we know they're getting Rapterra, which was their volcano replacement. And I kind of see Great Adventure going through the same treatment. The only difference is that their Ka replacement is coming out in 2026, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to alleviate all that has been hurt by a lot of the GP, a lot of the enthusiasts from this park. For 2025, I really think that this park's going to have and really get hurt a lot. And in terms of monetary, in terms of just overall attendance, is going to be at a low. I don't think it'll be an all-time low, but I do think it's going to be a much smaller attendance than what they might think. Now, don't get me wrong, I think once all these things happen, I think that the attendance in general will rejuvenate over time, but the trust is not there now. They've seemed to have lost all the trust with everybody in terms of not only like the public, but also looking at staffing potentially as well. People are really, really ticked off. And it's unfortunate that that is the case because this is one of the best parks on the planet that kind of just got absolutely destroyed by a company that was merged with them. And who knew what the future would have been like if the merger didn't happen? But I'm also not pinning the blame on the merger. The merger definitely played a massive role in why Great Adventure is in the state that it's in right now. Because I'm pretty sure, like, if they wanted to close Con next season in 2025, they would have been able to do that. But I think that they want to push everything as much ahead as they possibly can with Ka is why it closed so early. And Ka closing definitely was the nail in the coffin for a lot of people. And unfortunately, it just so happens to be the reason that a lot of people aren't going to buy season passes or cancel memberships or not show up to the park at all. Many people are going to go to Hershey. Many people are going to go to Dorney. Many people are going to try to explore new areas. I've even heard people are going to try Busch Gardens. Like, there's a lot of things that went wrong this season. And at the end of the day, you have to have bad seasons to have good seasons. You have to have bad days to have good days. That's just life in itself. And hopefully, like the new adjustment, the new leadership, they have plans at this rate, whether you want to trust them now or you want to trust them later. Either way, we have to just live in the moment, be happy, stay positive, and just go out and ride some roller coasters. Hope you guys enjoyed my Six Flags Great Adventure 2024 season summary and honest review. Let me know what you think of this whole entire very disappointing season from Great Adventure, in my honest opinion. Again, I love this park to bits. I will still go to this park whenever I can because I love this place so much. It literally is a therapeutic place for me, in all seriousness. So I love this place. I'm very eager to see how this place grows from losing rides like Ka and changing up the whole skyline. I'm very intrigued to see what happens because, again, think positive and positive things will happen. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Always thank your ride operators. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all in the parks. Goodbye.
Here we go.